Hi, Marco. I am so excited for this conversation. Today we have Marco Casalaina. He is the VP of Core AI and Futurist Products at Microsoft, where he leads the AI Futures team, which finds trends and develops products that will lead to the next generation of AI. Prior to this, he led large AI initiatives at Salesforce. And what I love about the work that Marco's doing is he's not just a product and a technology thinker, but he's also a futurist. So today, I want to explore the future through your eyes, Marco, and we can discover how AI is going to reshape daily life, communication, thinking, identity, and what all of this means for creativity and humanity. So thank you so much for being here, Marco.
Thank you for having me.
So to begin, can you share a little bit about what you're doing at Microsoft?
Well, yeah, so I'm VP Products of Core AI and AI Futurist, but concretely, what that really means is that I generally get to be the first person to try anything new. And it happens usually once or twice a week that somebody comes up with something that's like, hey, here's this new thing. Do you want to try it? It actually has happened to me twice this week already. And I tell you, one of these two things has blown my mind this week.
What a cool job. Can you share one of these two things?
Actually, I can because it's already public. So we are working on something called Opal that we publicly made a blog about, although we haven't released it to the public yet. It's a computer use agent, and you might have seen these before if you ever used Manus or ChatGPT in agent mode or Perplexity. It uses a computer. But in the case of Opal, I mean, it provisions a computer. So it provisions a virtual machine that is logged in as me. And this is the best one I have ever tried. And let me tell you, I have tried a lot. It has been able to do every task I've given it so far. And I really ran it through the jungle gym. So this is getting interesting now.
Can you give an example of one of the tasks that I was able to perform?
Well, all right. Here at Microsoft, I do a lot of traveling and I have to file expenses often. And we have MS Travel and MS Expense. Both of these websites are absolutely craptastic. I mean, they are really bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, like 2005 level bad. And I have tried computer use agents on both of these things, because if there is one thing that I would like to automate in my own sort of business life, it is making my travel and doing my expenses and stuff like that. I have an assistant that can help me with that, but she also helps a whole bunch of other people. And I would love to be able to automate that for her too, frankly. And up to this point, all of the computer use agents that I have tried that include browser use, computer use preview, I tried the Anthropic one, I've tried a whole bunch. They all failed on these sites. There are elements of these sites that are very not user-friendly that even confuse me.
Sure.
And it confuses the computer use agents. And for the first time, the Opal agent, now it so happened that a couple of days ago, I did have some expenses to file and I ran Opal on that and it worked. And I couldn't believe it. So then I'm like, oh, well, I got to make myself a flight to Munich. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And I made it do that too. Now, it wasn't fast. And in general, computer use agents they're not fast. They don't move quickly because of the way they work. But it took it like 13 minutes. But at the end, there was my flight to Munich, a direct from SFO to Munich and back, just like I told it to do. And man, I couldn't believe it. It's for real.
That's impressive. Do you find these computer use agents work better on newer websites where maybe the UI, the UX is a little bit more intuitive versus some of these more legacy kind of products?
Definitely. That is definitely the case that, like, for example, when I used it on the United site where you can also book flights and stuff, it works almost always on the first try. And United has gone through a lot of effort to reduce clicks, to make their site a little bit more intuitive for users. Still, under any circumstance, date pickers are the bane of computer use agents. All date pickers are different. The one on United.com is different than the one on Marriott.com, which is the one different than the one on Orbitz or whatever. And so just like humans, I mean, honestly, I get confused also using date pickers, and so do these agents. But now they're getting better and better at figuring it out. And what's really funny about it all, though, is the fact that we're using these agents as this kind of a blunt instrument.
Yeah.
That we're using these agents on sites that are designed for humans. And that is a little bit silly. So where we're going to need to get to, and this is, I think, going to start happening now in the year 2026 and beyond, is that we're going to start optimizing sites for agents.
Totally. And now that we're kind of on this topic of like the future of apps and interfaces and design, I think we're entering a moment where the classic interface itself is dissolving. And a lot of this reason because a lot of the tasks that we humans would usually do are now being outsourced. So I think something really big is happening. So for the past 20 years, right, like software has had screens, icon, tabs, apps, design experiences. But now with the shift of these large language models, we are seeing a world where apps live inside chat windows instead of their own UI, right? Microsoft's doing that with Copilot, where Word, Excel, Outlook, and the browser is unified into one conversational layer. So as developers are beginning to use and build more of these chat-faced apps where there's not that traditional interface, I feel like we are getting more efficient. But on the other hand, I think it raises a question of if every app becomes this conversational layer with AI, what happens to design and experience and the creativity that goes with sort of the UI that goes with each app?
Yeah, but the chatbot is just a kind of a way station along the path to where we are going. I mean, yes, it's true that today's AI, certainly M365 Copilot, but also ChatGPT and Perplexity and everything else,
Yeah,
they expose themselves as chatbots because that's kind of where today's technology is. Now, gradually, you're starting to see voice interject itself into that experience. And today, it's very rudimentary. Like if you go to ChatGPT and you pop it into voice mode,
yeah,
now it's a voice bot and
yeah.
nothing else. Like you're talking to it and that's it. It literally has no interface at all. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. Now it transcribes what you're saying, but that's
Okay,
basic
yeah. And
interface.
it has that little bubble that moves around a little.
Yeah, I mean, it's better, but that's not what I mean. We are about to enter this world of what I call a fully interactive AI user experience. And that is where it's not just a chatbot and it's not just a voice bot, but it is a fully interactive application. The design comes back in a sense, maybe in a different way because you're interacting with it differently. So you're not necessarily interacting with it always visually, although you can or you
Yeah,
will be able to, but you can also interact with it by typing to it or by talking to it.
yeah.
The screen will change around. So it won't just be a chat bot and it won't just be a voice bot. It will be an application just of a type that we have not traditionally seen.
Nice. So it's almost instead of us losing creativity through this, it actually expands it because now we're not just designing for visual, we're now also doing for audio and for chat.
Right. And this kind of real time interactivity that entails.
So when you start thinking about building products now with this in mind, do you almost have two types of users? You have humans and then you have agents and being able to support an experience that can support both?
That's exactly the way to think about it is that you do need to support both because there's going to be a long tail of humans who will not use this technology, who won't adopt it. Even right now, I mean, the agent thing hasn't really entered the cultural zeitgeist, not in the way that ChatGPT has or did. And until it does, lots of people are still going to use the website, the mobile app, and those things need to be designed for humans to use.
Yeah,
But there is a growing need to create an optimized branch of your properties, of your sites and your apps and things like that for these agents to use specifically that are optimized for them, that are more text heavy and maybe not as visual.
for sure. Makes sense. So we're talking about how we have to change our behaviors in order to support this AI, right? But I want to explore how AI is actually maybe changing humans a little bit. And I think one area that we're starting to see it is in how we communicate. So language, right? I think it's one of the first places where AI is subtly rewiring us a bit. And we're starting to see something kind of strange happen with language as LLM spread. People are unconsciously adopting LLM-like phrasing. And I think a recent study from Cornell did some causal inference on about 1 million hours of YouTube academic talks, conversational podcasts, and they found this abrupt post chat GPT spike in words that the models prefer. I think it was examples like delve, comprehend, meticulous,
Mhm.
words I'd never used before, but now I feel like they're sprinkled in my vocabulary. And so, in some way, we are measurably reshaping human speech patterns with large language models. And the authors of this paper, they kind of take a little bit of a pessimistic view, I think, where they say that this marks the start of a closed cultural feedback loop where models trained on human language feed their own stylistic ticks back into us, raising questions about linguistic diversity, and they claim the potential for scalable manipulation. So, are you familiar with like the Star Trek Universal Translator?
Of course, I use that example all the time, as a matter of fact. But yeah,
Okay.
well, one of the modelisms that has entered, I think, the cultural, common brain. You're absolutely right. Like Anthropic Claude does that a lot, where it's like whenever you tell it it's wrong about something, it's always like you're absolutely right. I saw yesterday for sale a mug with the Claude icon on it that said "You're absolutely right" underneath it. That's how common that is. And the M dashes also. I mean, as you might know, ChatGPT is notorious for putting in M dashes,
I
which are
hate
like
it.
those long dashes, which, for me is unfortunate because I actually used M dashes a lot. But when it comes to linguistic diversity,
Yeah.
well, certainly I would hearken to the second book of the Three Body Problem by Chisholm Leo. In 200 years, in that book anyway, we all speak an amalgam of English and Mandarin. So
Okay.
everybody does, the whole world.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I have thought this before. I mean, I've always been interested in languages and the diversity of different languages and how it is that like Portuguese evolved out of Spanish, that they have these differences and so on, and Italian and French and all these kinds of things. But
Yeah.
then I often think, why is that good? I mean, is is linguistic diversity really a good thing? Why is it good that two people can't understand each other? That's silly. That defeats the point of language. It promotes this kind of tribalism, actually, is what it really is. It's like an
Yeah.
identity signifier. Oh, no, I speak Portuguese. I speak Galician or Gallego. I speak Spanish.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I mean, the purpose of language is to communicate. And so shouldn't we be able to communicate?
I definitely agree and see that point. I think on the other end, though, with all these languages, there is almost this layer of texture and uniqueness with each language. And there are examples, right, of like words that other languages have that we really can't, at least in a short form or in a couple words, summarize with English and
Right.
vice versa, right? And so if we kind of do this flattening out of, let's say, this one language that's a combination of Mandarin and English, in some way we're losing a lot of the history and the culture that's so innate to language. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most big models today are strongest in English, mainly prompted in English. All their docs, tutorials, examples are in English. So if we're kind of putting our energy into building these with English in mind, what does that mean for the other languages?
I mean, true, notwithstanding the huge number of very advanced Chinese models that are on the scene today,
Fair.
G42's Arabic model, Mistral's European language models. I
Okay.
mean, but you're right that, the frontier models, as we think of them right this moment, have a tendency to have a bias towards English
Yeah.
and Latin languages, I suppose. I mean, what you mentioned, though, I mean, the cultural underpinnings of language are fascinating, and I have recently had an experience of this myself. Now, so you mentioned the Star Trek Universal Translator. Of course, I am a big Star Trek fan. 2024, we started working on a feature which is now generally available in Microsoft Teams, which is called the AI Interpreter. The way that it works is like, let's say that we were having this conversation, and let's say that you didn't speak English, that you maybe only spoke Urdu or something, or Turkish or whatever.
Yeah.
It translates you in your own voice to me very capably. Honestly, it's striking. Now it is delayed, and so there's a delay there. Unlike the Universal Translator in Star Trek, there is a delay
Okay.
because yeah, in Star Trek, as soon as the Klingon opens his mouth, he's speaking English.
Yeah.
Now you realize it can't work that way. That's actually not possible. I mean, to take Urdu or Hindi as an example, the
Yeah.
verb tends to come at the end of the sentence. We cannot render a translation until we see the verb. So there
You would
must
need to
be
see
a
the whole.
delay.
Gotcha.
There has to be. But it definitely changes business. And so I use this feature quite a bit, especially when I'm talking to our customers in Japan or in Korea that, where they tend not to speak English. And so I turn this interpreter on and it is very effective.
Okay.
But I was meeting with a Japanese customer and I had a Darmok moment. Now, there was an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, I think season 5, and it's called Darmok, where they encounter an alien race and this alien race, the universal translator is working fine. I mean, they appear to be speaking English, but what the aliens are saying doesn't make any sense. They're saying Darmak and Jalad at Tanagra, Shaka when the walls fell, and things like that. Temba, his arms wide. These are real quotes. As you can tell, I really am a Star Trek fan. If you watch that episode, you'll see that I am quoting it word for word. So they're saying all these things, and Captain Picard and the Star Trek crew, they're like, what are they talking about? So the universal translator is working.
Yeah.
Cultural concepts don't compute. This did happen to me where I was speaking to some Japanese customers, and they said something that was clearly some kind of a metaphor that just has no analog in English. It was something like, I wish I remembered this one word for word. It was something like, the straw is in the wind, or something like that. And it translated it kind of literally. And I was like, I have no idea what that means, but okay. I had my Darmok moment, which you could also have. I mean, you could consider, for example, the Chinese concept of face. Now, of course, in English, we have the notion of saving face, for example, but face in Chinese is not exactly that. It's kind of like honor. Like, for example, once one of my Chinese colleagues said to me, he says, if we do that, then we have no face. And that, it's like we have no honor. It's like we are doing something shameful. There is not an exact translation of that term to English. And so, I mean, I think you're right in the sense that there is a certain cultural connotation to language that is difficult to replace when a language is gone.
Let's say anywhere from 100 to 1,000 years in the future. Big timeline. Do you suspect the amount of languages we have on this planet will get smaller?
Well, it's funny that you should say on this planet too, because, you know, other planets, by that time, I would think that, you know, we will start to be a multi-planetary, multi-star system, say in 1,000 years from now. I should hope so.
Yeah, I hope so.
You know, I am going to make a prediction now.
Yeah.
That is maybe a little bit sideways, and I'm going to place this prediction 25 years in the future. So that puts us in the year 2050. And now you can test me 25 years from now and see whether my prediction has come true. I think what's going to happen is this. A couple of years ago, I was at this futurist conference. So they, believe it or not, futurists have conferences. And sometimes I meet people that have my job in other companies. And we have these conferences sometimes. And there was this conference. And at this conference, people show off this kind of futuristic technology. So I went up to this one booth, and this guy was sitting there, and he says to me, he's sitting in a chair like this, and he says to me, tell me your email address.
Yeah.
And he was wearing, on his ear, he had something that looked like an old school Jabra kind of Bluetooth, like the original Bluetooth headset thingy that was like a big chunky thing that you stick on your ear.
Right.
So he's sitting in this chair, and in front of him, and he just sits in this chair, he doesn't move at all. In front of him, the keyboard pops up, the on-screen keyboard pops up, and it starts typing my email address. And then with that, he types me an email without moving the whole time. He's just sitting in this chair. And what he told me was that this thing that was on his ear was actually reading tiny jaw movements, that he had trained it in such a way. It wasn't reading his mind, but he was able to communicate with this thing by, I guess, reading his jaw somehow.
Were you able to see his jaw moving, or was it so subtle?
Just a couple of times when he initiated that Rubik's Cube interface that was like an app selector thing, I could see it kind of click just a little bit. But no, for the most part, I couldn't see it move. But this forms the crux of my prediction, which is that over the next 25 years, we're going to start to evolve technologies that will cause us to use vocal language less and less. And it might be like this, or it might be like what Neuralink is doing, or there are various other companies that are in this space. But 25 years from now, we will have a different mechanism of communication that will be post-verbal, as predicted in the movie Her, by the way, although that was two agents kind of post-verbally communicating with each other. So there will be post-verbal communication. Furthermore, I further predict that this will create a kind of a two-tier system where vocal communication will be considered kind of guttural. Kind of like my relatives in Sicily, they, you know, there are 5 Sicilian dialects. My relatives in Sicily speak Catanese, which is a Catania dialect. They don't really speak that colloquially amongst themselves. And then otherwise they speak Italian or English. And so vocal communication will be like that Catanese dialect, where it'll be this kind of like guttural, familiar, like, oh yeah, let's talk with our voices. But
Huh.
in daily life or as you're doing business or whatever, we'll have silent meetings, right? We'll be sitting here thinking to each other because it'll be a
Huh.
lot more efficient and language independent. So whether your base language is Japanese or Chinese or Hindi or whatever
Yeah.
it might be, it doesn't matter anymore because we can kind of sort of broadcast thoughts to each other in a certain sort of way. So
Huh.
I do believe this is going to happen. And I think that's going to change the nature of language. And it'll give us really interesting insights too on what even is language? What is
Yeah.
that and how does it evolve?
That's fascinating. 25 years is, it feels like in a way around the corner. And that would almost make language feel, spoken language, feel extremely intimate if we're only really bringing it out and using it with people that we maybe trust. It can almost be a form of, I trust you, so I'm actually going to use my voice.
Right. Right. But the irony with that is that,
Yeah.
I probably, in the same way that I could like send you a Slack message, but nobody else,
Yeah.
vocal language will be like sending a
Yeah.
Slack message to the whole channel that everybody can hear, right? Everybody around us right now, the dude in the room next to me right now is probably annoyed by my voice right now, but in this future world, he would not be.
I like this little thought exercise. Huh. Okay, 25 years. I'm going to mark it on my calendar. Let's
Let's
see.
see. So that'll be
Yeah.
December 11th, 2050.
Yeah.
Let's see if I'm right. Now, my daughter gives me a lot of grief. My daughter was about to turn 16, and so she's
Okay.
going to get her driver's license here in California. She gives me a lot of grief for the fact that some years ago, I'd say at least 10 years ago, I predicted that by the time she gets her driver's license, self-driving cars will be everywhere and she won't really even need it.
Yeah.
And she's like, where are my self-driving cars? On the other hand,
Yeah.
I mean, if I turn around right here and I look down Kearney Street, I
Huh.
mean, I am sure I can see a Waymo if I sit here for more than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
San Francisco is awash in them, and Waymo did just get a license to operate all throughout California. So
Nice.
I may have been just off
Yeah.
on my prediction of the date, but I am super close, I think.
Okay. All right. I think this one, I could see it actually. And I want to now actually, we talked about communication, AI's impact on communication. Beyond language, do you think, so maybe we'll talk a little bit about how it's changing how we think. Okay. So I think in a world of AI, a lot of our intelligent effort can be outsourced. Even taking the example of booking a flight, right? And for that stuff, great. That's efficient. It gives us maybe more capacity to think about things that are a little bit more creative, a little bit more challenging, right? But we see Teams and Zoom automatically summarizing our meetings. We have Copilot, ChatGPT that are able to take these long papers, legal documents, put it into 5 bullet points. Great. Search is no longer about discovery and browsing. It's like, how do we get a synthesized answer? How do we be efficient in buying this product? So, and now as we even start to think about hardware, right? I think Meta recently acquired that pendant Limitless, right? So now it's not only talking about efficiency in tasks, we're talking about this concept of memories being externalized, right? So moments that we typically would forget about, they're not important. We can only memorize 1,000 memories a day. Let's forget about the rest. All of a sudden, everything can be saved. So a question that comes to mind is, if thinking becomes collaborative, part human, part machine, what does that mean for the human's cognition, attention span, and pace at which ideas form?
Right. And it's interesting, and I think it's something that we are all collectively exploring now. I mean, we are kind of a collective experiment. And of course, there are analogs for this in the corpus of science fiction as well. I mean, certainly when you think about the devices, the
Yeah.
movie Her, which was a very prescient movie. I mean, and honestly, when the movie Her came out in 2013, I really thought that that was going to be 2040. Little did I know we were talking 2025 with that,
Seriously.
right? And it
Yeah.
even predicted, the humane pin, which I mean, I don't think it really succeeded, but it'll be back something like that. As you may remember, part of the movie Her, where he puts that little thing in his pocket and allows her, the OS, to participate in a kind of a group date that they're doing. Yeah, when it comes to things like life logging, that is well predicted by, well, there's an episode of Black Mirror like that. I think that's season 2.
Yep.
And also, like in Ted Chiang's book, The Story of Your Life and Others, that's an excellent book. One of the short stories in there was the basis for the movie Arrival. But there's another short story in that same book, which is all about life logging, which is basically Imagine if you could remember everything in your life that, when my wife was like, hey, you remember that time we were dancing the salsa at that wedding? And immediately in my field of view comes a video of that exact time, right? So even if I don't remember it, I do now. And these things, yeah, they're starting to happen now. I just got an ad on Twitter yesterday for some life logging glasses, right? And you can totally see that being the extension of what the meta glasses will be,
Oh,
that
yeah.
they will record your life and save that and index it. This is going to happen soon enough. Now, the privacy implications of that are certainly challenging. Do I consent to being recorded? Do I consent to being identified in this way? That's going to be very challenging, but gradually, bit by bit, we are already moving towards that world where indeed, I mean, the fact is I am being recorded always everywhere. I mean, just there's this camera here and there's one right behind it over there. There's some on the street over there, and they're everywhere you look. So to some degree, that's kind of already happening.
Yeah.
Now, lately, I just started really binge watching Pluribus. I don't know if you've seen this.
No.
I thought it was going to be mind bending, and it totally is. So it's about this kind of virus that causes everybody to have one mind. So basically, everybody becomes Borg, which is yet another science fiction reference. Borg from the Star Trek series, where all the Borg basically think with one mind. This is also true in the series Pluribus, except for like 13 people in the world. For some reason, they're not affected by this virus. And so they are the only ones who can think independently. And the
Huh.
whole rest of the world, 7 billion people or whatever, are all thinking with one mind. And to some degree, I mean, we are approaching that. I mean, when you think of what the writers of Pluribus were thinking when they wrote this, they surely were thinking that indeed it even today approximates that, in the sense that, like, I
Yeah.
can right now text my wife and my daughter or somebody in Bangladesh. I can call them at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
And so we are at a kind of a rough approximation of this groupthink already. As this communication technology becomes better and more seamless and more real time,
Yeah.
we get closer and closer to that. Well, but what does that entail for us? What does that entail for individuality? uh,
Yeah.
and all of that stuff. I mean, on one hand, this ability has made the world move faster, has
Huh.
made our ability to make advances in AI, in medical science, and all kinds of things much, much faster than ever before, because we can collaborate more quickly. But it's also created this kind of feedback loop that you alluded to earlier also. There is this kind of negative feedback loop that also happens, that's being manifest, for example, in politics, and that's not great.
And in Pluribus, the 7 billion or 8 billion people that have this one mind, is it a super mind because it's everyone's brains, everyone's thoughts, intelligence combined into the
It's a
super
super
being?
mind, right? And so
Okay.
the super mind has memories of everybody who's joined it,
Okay.
and they know all the things everywhere. It's
Cool.
creepy, but it's
Yeah.
super well done. Next episode comes out tomorrow. I'm really
Okay.
looking forward to it because I binge watched all the first 6 episodes, and it's like,
Okay.
man, now they leave me hanging. I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
what is this?
Yeah. Okay, so cool. And so I guess the next step after how AI can impact our thinking, I want to talk about embodied AI because bigger AI, right? They're actually now AI is not just existing in a screen or a computer or something, it's actually becoming embodied. And I
Right,
think it's so weird because I don't know why figure AI decided to make these robots look so human. I'm sure there was a pro, I'm sure there was a con, but I guess we went with that. And so I'm starting to think, okay, one, should we be treating these embodied AIs similar to a human, or should we be treating them as like a computer or a tool? What are your thoughts on that? Because I've had people on this podcast that think AI is a tool. It will always be a tool. I don't want to even think about it as a human. And then my last week episode, my guest said AI is more similar to a human.
that is exactly the topic of the movie Bicentennial Man, which
Okay.
talking about before we started recording. And that is one that I recommend that everybody watch. It's a very good movie. It is about a domestic robot, a humanoid domestic robot, which is Robin Williams, which a family brings home to act as a domestic robot. And at first, it does domestic robot things and cooks stuff and whatever. And over time, it starts to become more and more sentient, starts to do more and more creative things like whittling little animal figures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting movie, I think, and it does point to exactly the kind of discussion that we're having. right now. And yes, I mean, this is coming. I was driving up the 101, and for those of you who are not from the Bay Area, well, the 101 corridor between San Francisco and San Jose, if you want to know what's going on in the world of technology, that's where it's at. The billboards on 101 are
Yeah.
going to tell you what's going on. And for the moment, everything on the 101 is AI, 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 AI. There is one spot in San Mateo, right off the 92 interchange, and there is a 1X Neo ad. And a 1X Neo is also a humanoid robot. It's like 5'6", it's all looking made of felt, except for like two little eyes. So it doesn't really look like a human. But when I see that ad, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Like we're going straight to Bicentennial Man. Next stop, Bicentennial Man. In my view, though, I definitely do view it more as a tool, and that's part of because of the fact that I mean, I work with it every day, and I am constantly using, the next generation of AI. And even as I use that next generation of AI, I don't see sentience in that. Maybe it's because I see it as parts. I see that there's the large language model, which itself is stateless, or the large now omni model, as we say. It's not just language anymore because they do audio and video and those kinds of things too now. But there's the model, but the model is inherently stateless. It doesn't really learn per se. Now you can give it a memory and that causes it to look like it's learning, but I know because I've set these things up myself that it's not really. That
Yeah.
it's kind of a veneer. And it looks increasingly intelligent and it sounds increasingly intelligent,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's not sentient. It can seem that way, but it's not. So, I mean, in the same way that I mean, I can make you into a large language model. You want
Yeah.
to do this? Okay, so here, yes. What would you do if I just didn't finish this? Now that's not a glitch. I didn't glitch. Now, I mean, it seemed like it might have been an internet glitch, but it's not. It's not. I intentionally cut myself off there. And in your head, you said a word. You finished it. What did you say?
Sentence.
There, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
every now and then people will say statement or whatever. So you can do it too. You do the same kind of completion. This is exactly how a large language model works. This is how all these models work.
Hmm.
Is that they are effectively completing the next token in sequence like that by picking the highest probability word, which is sentence. When I do that, does that make it sentient? Does sentience arise from that? Because, I mean, it's pretty difficult to define what is sentience, what is consciousness and stuff like that. But I think we can all fairly confidently say that that ability alone is insufficient to make something sentient. And fundamentally, that's what all models are doing, no matter what you use. And now we may layer on top of it memories and things like that. But even then, all you're doing is expanding the context before that point at which it needs to make the prediction as to what the next thing is.
Yep.
So I don't know what makes things sentient. I don't know what makes us conscious or even what consciousness is. But I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that alone is not it. My own knowledge of how these things work makes me
Yes.
think, no, they're not. Then again, I have some friends that are emergency room doctors, and I mean, they know presumably how all the parts of humans work, right? What your kidneys do, what your liver does, and in a way that I don't fully understand. I'm pretty sure that the both of them think that humans are sentient, even though they know how all the parts work.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Huh. Okay, so I actually want to pick your brain on sort of what's coming next when it comes to AI, right? So you called out some of the limitations of LLMs, right? They can't online learn. There's cost and energy efficiencies. They can hallucinate. Their reasoning's pretty shallow, and right now they struggle with real world embodiment. So what do you think is coming next? I've heard of small language models, world models. Is that what you're thinking, or is it something else entirely?
Well, okay, so let's consider the relatively immediate future, the next 1 to 2 years. As of this recording, we're talking on December 2025. So here I'm talking about the world through 2027. First of all, I mean, there's a lot of talk of agents. Everybody's talking about AI agents. Still, the vast majority of people haven't really touched an agent yet, not in any serious or significant way yet.
Yeah.
At some point over the next year or two, agents are going to have this cultural zeitgeist moment in the way that ChatGPT entered the cultural zeitgeist 3 years ago, in December of 2022. At that time, most people had no idea what generative AI was. I used to do these presentations where I would show GPT-3 at that time to people. and they would be gobsmacked. And that is not an astonishing thing anymore.
Yeah.
So when something enters the cultural zeitgeist, it becomes not a magic trick anymore. It becomes just something that you do.
Hmm.
Right now, what we're talking about with agents doing, like, making your travel for you and stuff like that, that's still in the magic trick realm, because the reality is, even if you have tried an agent to do that, if you try to get Manus or something to do that for you, the
Yeah.
likelihood that it's going to do that successfully is pretty slim right now. But it's about to not be. And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, like, I just did use an agent that totally did do that successfully for the
Yeah.
first time in my life. And this is coming to you too. So over the
Yeah.
next year or two, I predict that these agents will enter the cultural zeitgeist in the consumer realm. They'll start to really show up on your phone and your web browser and your operating systems in a way that you're going to use them and you're going to not be able to remember how you lived without them, just like ChatGPT is now, or like mobile devices are now, or the web. So that is in the immediate term. Now, one of the other things that we've been talking about, going forward, self-driving cars are a thing, and they're going to continue to be a thing. And, in the next 5 years or so, all cars will at least have a self-driving mode. The notion of Waymo and Zoox, the Tesla robotaxis, and all the various different Chinese brands that are already also self-driving will become worldwide. And certain tasks like driving will be less and less common, will be as uncommon as the manual stick shift is today. Can you drive a stick? I kind of sort of can, but I'm pretty out of practice. I'm sure I'd grind the gears if I tried.
Yeah.
So, and that's going to be a thing. And then
Okay.
yes, the robotics will
Yeah.
absolutely be a thing. And here I mean general purpose robotics, because of course robotics have in fact been a thing for decades. I
Right.
mean, in terms of building cars in those manufacturing plants in Detroit and so on, I mean, they are largely already built by robots, but special purpose robots that are made to do this weld or put this door on or whatever it might be.
Okay.
We are just entering the realm where they can start to do general purpose tasks. So I invoke the notion of the 1X Neo.
Uh-huh.
And the 1X Neo, the reality is, if you were to buy one of these things today, I think they're $20,000. You actually can buy one now, but they are human actuated. That is to say, so for example, if I tell the 1X Neo, go take the dishes out of my dishwasher and put them in the cabinet, well, it will fall back on a human operator if it can't figure out the task. So it'll start trying to do it. And if it can't do it, it'll be like, okay, human, control me. And somewhere they have an army of humans that are controlling these things, and we'll start putting the things away. So for the early adopters, you have to accept that. I mean, there's a certain privacy aspect to that too. You have to accept that you're training them. But over time, as these things get trained, these are the world models you're talking about, right? So these
Yeah.
world models will be these different modalities. The modalities we know today, certainly text for large language models, but also now audio and video and images
Hmm.
are what omni models today can take in and then sometimes emit. But there will be these new modalities, which will also be audio and images and things like that, but it'll also be sensory data. Like I can feel if I'm holding a dish or if I'm holding this phone or whatever.
Yeah.
And the modality of output will be like emotion. Like I want to put this phone on the desk and now I have done it. And so we'll have new modalities for these types of omni models, and that you can call a world model. And as those become more sophisticated, where simultaneously we continue to improve the ability of these robots to work and their power sources and stuff like that, so they can be dog shaped, human shaped, whatever shaped,
Yeah.
these things will come together to create this kind of robotic future from 2030 and beyond. So I think domestic robotics will absolutely be a thing.
Yeah.
And, that's it's going to be part of our lives over the next 10 years. Yeah.
You think in the next 10 years, these kind of multi-purpose robots will be in the majority of people's, or maybe majority of, let's say, the US people's homes and then the world homes. When do you think that timeline is for the US and then for the world?
If I had to place a bet, my bet would be that it will enter the cultural zeitgeist first in Japan, Korea, and China, where they
Okay.
have sort of a demographic crisis that will necessitate the use of these robots, especially Japan, but Korea also, where they have a very low birth rate
Yeah.
and a low immigration rate. And they're going to need somebody to take care of all these people. Who's going to do it? Well, and it's, you already start to see it happening in Japan and Korea. And meanwhile, they also have these really well-developed high-tech industries in all three of those countries that are
Yeah.
capable of producing these types of robots and the software and the hardware that they need. So, I think of Samsung and I think of Toyota and Honda and
Yeah.
all of these companies. So, yeah, if I'm looking for where that innovation is going to come from, well, certainly the US is going to be in it, but necessity being the mother of invention, yeah, I'd place my bets on Japan and Korea and China
Reasoning
first.
makes a lot of sense. Okay, moving on to the last segment of this episode. Would you ship, in which I will pitch you a futuristic product idea and you tell me, would you ship this product?
Okay.
So the product is called the What If I engine. So the engineer in me likes to think of life as a series of decision trees. So a series of branching futures where every branch is essentially a fork in the road. And I think humans in general, depending on the moment and who they are, we rely on our hearts, our gut, and our mind or head to different proportions to make these sort of big fork in the road decisions. So in comes the What If I engine. So so this engine won't give you answers, but it will basically generate branching futures of your history based off of your values, your patterns, your behavioral models. So you could ask it a question as big as like, what would happen if I take this job? What if I marry this person? What happens if I move cities? And it would essentially give you probabilistic futures and show you how your creativity, your health, your relationships, your career might be impacted along each of these different paths. And it won't really necessarily tell you, right? It can't it can't say with 100% fact, this is what you should do, but it can help your heart, your gut, and your head talk to each other with a little bit more information. So, Marco, tell me, would you ship this product?
Interesting. I have many reservations about such a thing,
Yeah.
which, by the way, is also predicted in another Ted Chiang short story.
Okay.
I think it's called the Universe Splitter, but I can't quite remember.
Okay.
It splits the universe. Right?
Yep.
So do I take this job? Do I not take this job? But in the short story, in the Universe Splitter, you split the universe. So it makes the Boolean decision with the idea that you are supposed to rely on this thing to make that
Uh-huh.
decision. Yes, I will take the job if it says to take the job. And then in this alternate universe, it entangles something with the alternate universe so that you can communicate with it. So you can communicate with your alternate self that took the other decision. It's fascinating, this short story.
And
In
that
general,
regret, I'm sure, like that feeling of regret's going to go off the charts if that could happen.
right? Well, if y'all are not reading Ted Chiang, y'all need to be reading Ted Chiang. He writes great short stories and they are always thought provoking, I got to say. If there's one science fiction writer I would love to meet, it is Ted Chiang. Anyway, would I ship this? Now, the other thing is the probabilistic nature of what you just described. This
Hmm.
bothers me because, people don't have an intuitive understanding of probability. Now, let's say that the weather forecast says that there's a 90% chance that it's going to rain today, and it does not rain. It's sunny outside. Was the forecast wrong? I mean, not really, right? It said it had a 90% chance. Well, 1 in 10 times, it's going to not rain when it says that, right? So I think the difficulty of an application like that is that because people don't have an intuitive comprehension of what probability really means,
Yeah.
they will tend to misinterpret what the app is telling them. On the other hand,
Yeah.
I do think that having a structure like that to help people make better guided decisions. Should I buy this boat or not? The answer is almost always no. A boat is a hole in the water that you throw money into. So, like maybe that kind of guidance for
Yeah.
that reason alone is probably a good idea. I just don't know that I would ship it exposing its probabilistic nature because people just won't quite understand what that truly means.
Okay, so maybe the product with the stats lesson, something like that.
Or maybe just hiding the probability and picking the best choice and kind of explaining to you in prose why and
Yeah.
what might happen if you make that decision versus the other.
Thank you so much, Marco. This was such a fun episode. Loved all your insights and honestly talking about so much sci-fi, so many sci-fi books and movies and TV shows. That was really fun.
Thank you. Well, welcome to my life. I live a sci fi life. I think we all do now.